I am Bill Stoltz with the Kenton County Public Library, and today is Tuesday, June 21st, 2016. I will be interviewing Dale Ashcraft at the Covington Library in Covington, Kentucky. The other person attending the interview is our videographer, Mike Bloom, also of the Kenton County Public Library. This interview is being conducted for the Kenton County Public Library Veterans Oral History Project in conjunction with the Library of Congress Veterans History Project. Good afternoon, Mr. Ashcraft.
Good morning.
Could you please state your full name, birth date, branch of service, highest rank attained, and your dates of service? A lot at once.
Dale Ross Ashcraft. What was this? Go over the list again.
Birth date?
Okay, October 23rd, 1947. I served in the U.S. Navy Reserve. I was on active duty from May of 1969 to May of 1971. And my highest rate was E4.
E4. Okay, where were you born? And you want to talk about your parents?
I was born in, I was born in Cincinnati, but we lived in Ludlow is where I was born. My dad had gotten out of the Army after World War II, and he was the kind of guy that always wanted to be in business for himself. He didn't want to work for other people. So he took a little place down on Elm Street in Ludlow and built a trailer park. And that was the first place I lived.
Okay.
We had the house on the park, and then everybody else parked in there.
And did your mother work?
No.
And did you have siblings?
Yes, I've got 5 brothers and sisters.
Wow, big family.
Yeah. Back then it wasn't, but now it is.
Yeah. And did you go to school in Ludlow?
No. Before I started grade school, we moved to Erlanger. My mother didn't like the floods. And my dad sold the park and moved up the street by the vets, which is there, and built mobile home sales. He got out of the park business at that time. And then I was in Erlanger till the 3rd grade. After the 3rd grade, we moved to Union. My dad decided that he needed some room to put 6 kids, so that's where we went.
And in high school, were you involved in athletics or other extracurricular activities?
I was in a little bit of football. I was involved in some of the political parties in school, just the usual stuff. Did everything but study.
Like most of us.
Yeah.
And did you work during high school?
Actually, I did at the trailer sales. Dad would make us all start there when we were about 14, 15.
Did you enjoy working for your father?
I did it till he died. So he was a good guy, and he was a good boss.
And you graduated from high school? Did you go straight
Boone
to
County.
service?
No. I decided I was going to try to duck the service, and one of the ways you could do it at the time was higher education. So I went to University of Kentucky Northern Extension, which today is NKU, and it was down in up on the hill over Covington there on Dixie Highway.
And what did you study?
Nothing. I just went there, girls, and how to avoid doing work, and going out and partying and doing everything I possibly could. Everything but what I should do is what I did, and I was there for 3 semesters. And the dean of the school called me in one day, and he said, "Dale, we really like you. You're no problem. You don't cause any problems here." Because I really was I didn't drink really, and I didn't do anything. And he said, "But your grades, you're either going to have to leave or we're going to have to kick you out." So I was 1A. It seemed like a couple weeks later, I got my 1A classification, and they tried to set me up. They wanted to set me up for a physical for pre-induction. And back then, it was pretty much assured you'd go into the Army. And my dad had told me from World War II, he was in the Army. He said, you don't want to be in the Army, you want to be in the Navy or the Air Force. He said, you get fed, and you're usually dry, and you're usually clean. So I called people I knew and got into the Navy Reserve, which was located down Covington.
And what year was this?
1967.
Okay, so you were aware of the war in Vietnam prior to...
Oh, hell yeah. We knew what was going on, but, I'd have went if I had to. But so I signed up for the reserves, and when I signed up at that time, you did 12 months of meetings, Then you went for active duty for 24 months, and then you came back for 24 months of meetings. And I joined about the time Vietnam was really raging from the time I got out of high school in 65 till 67. And then Nixon came in and started backing it down. And they really wanted to get out, is what they wanted to do. And my 12 months became 2 years of meetings. In fact, we didn't think we were going to be going. And then one week I went in, they said, you're going on active duty next week.
Did you go to boot camp?
Boot camp in the reserves at that time was 2 weeks of boot camp in Great Lakes. In Chicago. And then you'd go on a cruise, and I caught mine up in wherever the Kennedy's wife was from. I don't know if it was Vermont or Rhode Island. I think it was Rhode Island. So we caught our cruise there for 2 weeks.
And what kind of cruise was it?
The ship, we got on a ship, and the ship just cruised down the coast it was in port up there for a week. It was Providence, Rhode Island's where it was. Then we cruised down to Norfolk, and all we did was, they had a little boat there they had us sand on for in fact, we almost sanded holes in the thing. That's how much we did on it. And that was it. That was my boot camp.
And then you were eventually called up for active duty?
I was called up for active duty, correct.
Did they send you a telegram?
No, I went to a meeting, and they came in and they said, Ashcraft, you're going on active duty next week.
Oh, so they gave you like 7 days?
Yeah. They had done it twice. The other time, I had a friend that was also in there, and he decided he was ready to go. Well, I had fallen in love before that, and I had sold my good car, and I was getting ready to get married, and so I thought that was great. Well, I ended up going.
Before you got married?
Well, no, not really. I went active, and they sent me to Norfolk for transition. They transition you to a different place. And from there, I was there for about 2 or 3 weeks, and they transitioned me down to a place called Dam Neck in Virginia, which is a gunnery school. And you're basically the grunt. At that time, I was E3, but you're basically the grunts for the gunnery school people. And then they assign you where you're going from there. They had told me I would probably get East Coast shore duty because I did have a couple years of college and I could type and that kind of stuff. Well, that turned out they assigned me to a ship called USS Mars, M-A-R-S. It was a combat store ship, and of course it was Vietnam-based ship.
So you were in Virginia and they decided they were going to send you to Vietnam?
Yeah. And what happened, when they give you orders, they give you 6 or 7 days to travel from Dam Neck on the East Coast to Travis Air Force Base in San Francisco. And during that period of time is when I got married. I came home. We had started speeding up the married stuff because we wanted to get married.
Yeah.
And so I got married, and 3 days later I got on a plane and flew out.
Did she travel to San Francisco with you?
No, because I was heading to, my ship was, I was going to meet my ship in the Philippines,
Okay.
Subic Bay, Philippines.
So how did you travel from here to San Francisco?
Flight.
Okay.
Terrible feeling too, walking out of that airport. When I got on a plane in Cincinnati, you're sitting there and you go, all I know is I got a Vietnam-based ship, and I don't know where in the hell I'm going or what I'm going to do, and that's...
Were you by yourself when you flew out?
Yes. Yeah, what's funny is my brother got married he had planned his wedding for 2 years. He got married the night I flew out, and I was there, and everybody was at the airport to tell me goodbye, and they were all in their tuxes and stuff to go to his wedding. My dad, he was a tough guy, but he was a marshmallow. He's there crying, and he had friends there crying. I didn't know where I was going.
And how old were you at the time?
That was 69. I guess I was 21.
And so you fly to San Francisco. Did they meet you at the airport?
I fly to San Francisco. They take us. We had a night layover. We went back to Travis, I think. and we flew out for the next day. We flew to Hawaii. We landed in Hawaii. We had about 3 or 4 hours there. And then we got back on another plane and flew to a place called Wake Island.
Yes, from World War II.
World War II. It's about as wide as this table, and where you're landing a jet on this thing. And we went there, and then that was just to refuel. And from there, we flew into Clark Air Force Base in the Philippines. And at that time, it was about 3 in the morning. We had been on a plane for 18, 19, 20 hours, something like that.
So you landed in the Philippines in Subic Bay.
We landed in Clark, in Manila.
In Manila.
And you get off the plane, it's 2, 3 in the morning. They put us on some old school buses. Clark pretty well got covered by that volcano that he went off a few years back. But we started there, and you had to go down to Subic. And it was probably, I don't know how many miles, 40, 50, 60 miles. And it seemed like it was straight downhill. And it was 3 in the morning, and the roads were this wide. And the Filipino bus drivers like to go 70 miles an hour. And we were just hitting the sides. We thought we were going to get killed on our way to. And we got there, and they gave us a bed, and that was it for the night. That was our first contact with them.
And so they wake you up the next morning?
Wake us up next morning, 6 o'clock or 5 o'clock or whatever it was. And we went down, we ate breakfast. I went in there and sat down. I remember I made a bowl of cereal, and I grabbed the sugar. They had those round sugar containers with the little flap on the top. And I went like this, and the sugar wouldn't come out because it was a solid block. It's like 170% humidity there or something. And that was my first contact with that kind of a weather situation. And then that afternoon, they made us work the first day doing some cutting grass or some nonsensical stuff. And then the next day, we went out and they gave us orders for our ship. Our ship had been assigned when we were in Dam Neck. But you get in a great big long line, you go up. There was a guy that had come with me. He's from Louisville. I'd never met him before. And we're both going to Mars. And he was a reservist, too. And
do you recall his name?
yeah, Mike Taylor was his name. In fact, he just came up here a month ago. I had lunch with him. And, yeah. You know, we kind of stay in contact with a lot of these people. And they came out, and I got to the desk, and it was my turn, and Mike's there, and they said, what's your ship? And we go, Mars. And they said, oh my God, that's a workingest damn ship in the Navy. We thought they were just playing with us. They were telling the truth. That was a working ship. They worked.
And so, were you picked up by the ship in the Philippines?
Philippines.
Okay.
Ship pulled in. What Mars did, it was built for Vietnam. In 1963, it was sent over, and it was basically a Walmart with guns, is what it was. And it was about 500 foot long, I think about 80 foot high. Yeah. That's Mars. Yeah. See, there's where I used to work. Well, but what they did, it went over to Vietnam, and it was home ported out of Yokosuka, Japan. And it would leave Yokosuka. It would go down from north to south down Vietnam for 3-4 weeks, and then it would pull into Subic, and it would reload, and then it would go back up the coast again. Because
just go in reverse.
yeah, you had a million guys in that area. You had lots of ships. We replenished not only land base, we replenished ships at sea. We had helicopters on the ship that carried pallets to other ships. We strung lines between our ship and other ships and sent pallets back and forth. And it was a 24-hour day job because it didn't matter what time of day it was. If they called condition red, which is when somebody was pulling up or getting ready for supplies, that's what we would do.
What was your main duty?
When I first got on board, I was a deck ape, or in the bosun's department. What I did was chip paint, clean floors, clean bathrooms, all the grunt work. And I was doing that for about 4 or 5 months. I was really getting in pretty good shape too. I was down to 175 from about, I think I was 225 when I graduated high school. So I lost about 50 pounds.
Yeah, all the hard work.
And they came in one day and they said, Ashcraft, do you know how to type? And I said, yeah. They said, would you consider working in an office? Oh, yeah, sure. So I didn't know what I had volunteered for, but it was an office called of all things, the PMS office. Women did not work there. It was a preventive maintenance system. Everything in the ship had a card, and you had to do that maintenance on that day at that time. And that office coordinated everything aboard. Everything on the ship ran through the PMS department.
Yeah, this was before computers, so you were.
There was no computers. So I went in there, and I was the first person to work in this office, and my boss was an E9, which is the highest enlisted rank you can get. He was called Chief of the Ship, and his name was Chief Arbogast, and powerful guy, and the best move I ever made, boy. He protected me for 2 years.
What was your daily ship life like?
Mine was pretty easy. After the decade stuff, you'd get up in the morning. I think it was 5. It's been so long for that. I just don't know. I think it was 5, and then you ate about 6, and then you had muster. You'd go out on the deck and line up, and they'd count, make sure you hadn't jumped overboard or something. And at that point in time, you start to work, and you work till 11. Then they call lunch. You go to lunch. Then you go back to work at noon, and then you work till 3 or 4 in the afternoon. If a ship pulled up, though, for transfer, supply ran the ship, supply department. So if somebody needed stuff, you didn't quit it forward. You kept going to the
So it was things like ammunition, food, clothing.
Agent Orange.
Agent Orange, just the chemical they used, the defoliant, I believe.
That's how I got exposed. Yeah.
From them, were they in 50-gallon drums or even bigger?
They were, they were bladders. They were about this big. And when I was working on deck one night, we had some of them break loose, and we didn't know what they were. I had no idea. I didn't know what Agent Orange was. I knew it smelled like something you put on your grass.
Mm-hmm.
And they called about 7 or 8 of us to go down in the hold. It was down the bottom of the ship to clean it up. And we were down there slogging around in it in tennis shoes for probably 4 or 5 hours, cleaning it. And that was my first contact with Agent Orange.
And you probably just thought you were cleaning up some basic chemical.
Yeah. Yep, sure did. So, and it's unfortunately killed a lot of the people that,
Yes, sadly.
yeah.
So what were your impressions sailing from the Philippines to Vietnam? What was that like? Had you been at sea before?
Only on cruise. First time, you don't know what you're getting into. You've got these guns up here and back here, and you got BARs up here on the decks and stuff, and you didn't know what you were heading into, but then you found out that half of them didn't work. So sometimes we'd pull into ports like Da Nang and Anthoy and Cameron Bay without any working guns. You get a few shots at you when you're sitting there, and we'd pull in the morning and then leave when it started to get dark.
Were you able to go ashore at all?
Yeah, that was the reason I got ashore was we had a beach party in Cameron Bay. We had a couple of beach parties, but that's how I got my Agent Orange exposure classification, because I had a letter saying that. They wouldn't have given it to me if I wouldn't have had that letter.
So you had the proof that you actually.
Boots on the shore, but I got my Agent Orange exposure at sea. But they won't count that because there's nothing in the ship's logs about it. So it's really a difficult situation. And they're burying all the mistakes that they've got, and we just have another one died 2 days ago, another crew member.
That's too bad.
Yeah, and I know it's Agent Orange exposure. They always die of the same thing. It's always cancer, diabetes related. I know we're getting older, but they've had it for a long time.
Yes. And so you were ashore, you went to a beach party.
The beach party. Didn't drink till I went in the Navy. Then that day I drank some beer. And I remember I was sitting there 90% looped, sitting in a pillbox with an M6. I was supposed to be on guard duty. And if I'd have shot anybody, I'd killed everybody there. Yeah, it's a good thing nobody shot at us. And that was my one experience.
That's always a good thing.
Yeah, that's really good. So, but that's, I remember we playing softball, and I slid home, and it's all sand and coral, and my entire leg from my ankle up to my butt was, all the skin was off of it. And it was just, I remember that, so.
Was it the only time you were able to go ashore?
Went ashore a couple times for a couple of those. And I went over one time, can't remember what it was for. I think I went over to pick up some office stuff or something over in, I think it was Da Nang. I really don't remember. Cameron was supposed to be the safest base there. Beautiful port. And I know the night after we had our beach party there, we pulled out that night, and the next day they blew the hell out of it. I mean, they blew it up. So that's the way it was over there. It was just, you never knew what was going to happen.
Yeah. Well, what was your first impression of Vietnam?
I want to go home. I had a lot of friends that did in-country stuff, and it just, not a good place.
Were you able to write your family, your wife and your parents back home?
Daily. That was a problem with mail, though. It was mail. And when you're out at sea for 4 weeks, unless a helicopter comes with your mail or delivers your mail, there's nothing that comes through. And my dad, I always liked to read the newspapers. So my dad set me up with the Post, Kentucky Post. And I know we'd pull into a port, and all of a sudden I have 30 newspapers there. It'd be that stack that high, that kind of stuff. So
The mail guys liked you when
they didn't like me. Yeah, but we didn't have like they've got now, where they've got computer contact and telephone contact.
Mm-hmm.
If we wanted telephone contact, I went over in I was only married 3 days when I went over there for a year. I spent a year there.
Okay, so you had 12 months for your
The first time.
the first time.
And we pulled into Hong Kong for R&R.
Mm-hmm. Rest and relaxation.
Yeah, and I called home, but the phone call was like $55 for the first 3 minutes, and I think it totaled about my dad about crapped. It was about $300 for a phone call. He told me keep writing. And we went to Hong Kong a couple times. My first time there, we went to that was Thailand. That picture with a snake around my neck. We went to Sadaheep, and we went to Singapore.
So you got to see a lot of Southeast Asia.
Quite a bit, yeah. Missed Australia. That's a place we all wanted to go. But
So how long would you sail up the coast of Vietnam before you would head to another location?
4 or 5 weeks. So
And what kind of ships did you supply? Were they all kind
everything.
of everything? Destroyers, escorts, frigates?
Aircraft carriers. One of the coolest things I ever saw when I was in it, our ship would go probably 28 knots, a little over 30 miles an hour. Just pretty impressive.
Yeah.
For a ship that big, that's
Yeah.
fast.
And we pulled up one day to the Enterprise. It was over there. And we sent over pallets to it. Well, it's huge to start off with. And it's about 10 times bigger than ours. And when they break cable, when they separate finally after we're all done,
Mm-hmm.
they broke cable. And our captain kicked ours down, and they kicked the Enterprise down. And the Enterprise left us sitting like we weren't even around.
Really?
But it would go, I heard it would go up to 50 knots.
Wow, and that was the aircraft carrier.
Aircraft, nuke, first nuke.
That's right.
It was amazing.
I think for years it was the largest warship in the world.
Yeah,
Yeah.
It was so fast. That's why I couldn't believe when they built the Kennedy, they didn't build it nuclear to make everybody happy, because the nuclear is burn cleaner, they're faster, and, you know, they're not gonna pull into your port and blow up. That's not the way they operate, so. But we did.
Fine, and so you would spend 4 or 5 weeks sailing up the coast or down the coast,
Supplying stuff.
and did you have interaction with other units, Army units or Air Force units?
Well, we had, like I said, we had pilots on our ship because we had helicopters.
Okay,
So we had some contact with them. When Vietnam finally went down and people started flying out in those helicopters. Some of them flew to our ship, but I wasn't there then. That was after I had left. So they said they were pushing them off the deck, the helicopters. There were so many of them.
and you mentioned that, did you go to Vietnam twice then? You said your first tour?
Yeah, we came back. They announced about a month before we came back that Mars would be returning to the United States. So it was the first time since 1963. That was 7 years.
Wow, so this is 1970?
70. So we went back to San Francisco, and they dry docked the ship at Richmond Naval Yard. And at that point in time, I flew home. I got my wife of 3 days, and we drove out to a little town called Alameda, California. That's where the Naval Air Station was.
Okay.
And we got an apartment there, and we lived there for 4 or 5 months.
And what were you doing? Were you still on the ship at that point?
Oh, yeah, I was still on the ship. We would go over and work on the ship during the day, and back then it was a situation where I had to be on a ship at 4 in the morning, and it was about a 35, 40-minute drive. And then we would get out at 1 and come back. And since I worked for the E9, he didn't make me stand duty, so I didn't ever have to stand duty while I was there.
And what did that involve, standing duty?
You could be out on the deck, dressed for people coming and going and coming to the ship to get them on board. You could just be standing watch someplace or walking, which I did when I was a decade, but I didn't do it after that point in time, which used to kill everybody that was, called them lifers. They just hated it. They tried to get me out there, and the chief would call them and say, "What the hell are you doing?" "He's not going out there." Okay.
So you had a really good relationship with Chief
Yeah.
Robert Gass?
Yes. Yeah, it was good man.
Did you have any interaction with the naval officers that were on the ship?
Oh, yeah. I worked for the engineering department, and our chief engineer was a guy by the name of Brick Baker, B-R-I-C-K. Great guy. We had some really good officers, some really good petty officers, and I would flow between that office and I was assigned to the engineering department as a yeoman. And we had some really good people. The ship was really full of good people. It was amazing, because I didn't expect it.
Mhm.
I didn't expect it.
And did you have an adjustment period when you came back the first time, being on the ship, and then suddenly you're living in an apartment in California?
I was having fun. I enjoyed it. When I got back, I weighed 175 pounds when I went home. I had lost 50 pounds. I was home. We came back. I was back on the ship 30 days later, and I gained back 25 pounds. That was the adjustment period. But we had a great time out there. Mike Taylor, the guy that I went through, him and his wife were living out there. He had called me. Been his best man when he got married when we came back. Another fellow, his name was Carl Dickman. He was the yeoman in the engineering office. Him and I had become good friends. And my wife became good friends with his wife. And they lived a floor above us in the apartment building we lived in.
Was it a civilian apartment complex?
Yes.
And what'd you do for fun in the evenings?
Whatever you could do with what little money you had. I think at the time I was making $300 a month.
$300 a month?
Yeah.
And this was an E3?
Yeah, and my wife was 300 or 280 or. My wife was getting 180 support money a month from it, and that was it. Of course, Dad helped out. my dad was always there if I needed help, or Mom. And we drove up to Yosemite, and my wife had a grandmother that lived in Napa, which is at the northern part, and they go up there, and so
And San
we had a great time. That was probably the best years of my marriage.
Really?
Yeah, my first marriage.
And San Francisco was sort of the epicenter for the anti-war movement, so did you see any of that when you were back?
Basically saw it when I came back the second time. And we flew into San Francisco airport, and we got pelted.
With,
Whatever crap they could get a hold of. They'd do it from above, though, because they were afraid to do it down here, because they would have got killed if they'd come down. But that was my first contact with them. So
and you mentioned that you did a second tour, so did they give you like a week notice? Did they tell you were going back?
we knew when we were going back. I thought I would get released because I was only 6 or 7 months away from my discharge date, and I had no intention of re-upping. But they took me. They said I was in what kind of rate was it? I was in a needed rate, but they used some other word for it. They were giving early outs all over the place. 90 days, 4 months, 2 months, 6 months. And I got another tour back over there. And so we went over, and again, we went to Hawaii. Then we went to, when I got to Hawaii, I had $1.50 in my pocket because I used to send everything home. So we walked down to downtown Honolulu, sit on a bench. We couldn't afford a hamburger. We just sit down on the bench and watch cars go by and that kind of stuff. And that was our night. Walk back to the ship. And then we went back on over. I think we pulled into Subic because we were more to Subic from then on. At first, we started out, when I first went there, it was Yokosuka. All the lifers that had their families over there and their stuff, that's where they all lived. But they the Japanese, every day they would pick at the front gate, and it was just, I would imagine they were getting tired of it.
Did you ever go out in Japan at all? Or did you just
Little bit. I say I really didn't drink or anything. The second time I went over, I learned how to drink because I was really depressed when I did not want to be there. I said I got lucky the first time, and so when we got to Yokosuka, me and Carl, the guy that worked in the other office, we went over, and that's the first night of my life I had ever been drunk, and I was drunk. So I ate squid. I think they cooked it. I don't know, because it was a bad situation. It was supposed to be some kind of chicken restaurant. I'm there eating squid. So.
And you mentioned how long was your second tour? You mentioned 7 months left on your.
7 months.
Okay.
My early out was 6 days.
6 days, and so you just once again cruised the coast of Vietnam. This would have been mid-1970 by that point.
Yeah, from the rest of up until May of 71.
Wow, so the war was slowly winding down at that point.
It was still going pretty good.
Did you see or hear anything? Were you close enough to the shore to see or hear anything?
Yeah, we'd hear some, but not much. That was a weird thing about the war. We controlled the sea, we controlled the air, we controlled the ground, but we let somebody else win a war. I've never figured that part out, but that's the way it was. They wouldn't mess with us at sea. They never got close to us. We'd pull into port, they'd take a shot at you, but that would be about it.
And when you say they take a shot, did they shoot rockets or just a rifle?
It seemed like it was small arms fire, bounce off. We did have one little experience though. Back there used to be a guy that in Singapore, I forget the name of the guy, was the head of the country. Sukarno was his name. And we would get the news, they would come up, we'd have a loudspeaker and they'd give us the USA News or whatever it was called then, Stars and Stripes. And there was a ammunition ship that the that had been hijacked in Indonesia, loaded with ammo, and it pulled out of there. And at that time, I was privy to the information of what was going on with the ship, where it was going, and all of a sudden I started reading messages. Our captain had volunteered us to find the ship. Well, we knew where the ship was, but to put steel plating on one side of our decks and set up gun mounts all over the place, and think about boarding this ship and taking it over, because we had saved a couple other ships that were burning out there, but he volunteered for this action. Well, it's never wise to take a shot at a ammunition ship, and he gets message back from the commander, the SINCPAC fleet is what it was called, 7th Fleet, saying no, desist and leave. And we did, and found out later it was a CIA operation.
Oh, really?
They had set it up. So it was interesting. So
It sounds like
yeah,
it. And this was closer to, you said Singapore?
yeah. Indonesia.
Indonesia.
Yeah. So it was, you ran into stuff while you were there, and if you saw it, you'd go, my God, what in the hell is he doing? He's going to get us all killed, And he starts saying, well, we might have 3% loss or something. I go, who the hell wants to be lost out here in the middle of the water? So,
And so after that, did you go back to Vietnam?
yeah, back on. We were online anyway at that time.
Okay.
They had come out into the shipping lanes. What they were doing with it, I don't know. I did read a account of it online one time, but I don't remember the specifics.
I'll have to look that up 'cause it does sound really interesting.
Yeah, it was. It was.
And you mentioned that you were giving your notice 6 days short.
Well, I knew when I was going to get out, and they had set up our plane flight out of the Philippines, out of Clark.
Okay.
And it's always sunny there, but it's like 190 degrees all over that place. And so we know when we're getting out, me and Mike Taylor, the guy I came with, we were getting out the same day. He didn't get an early out either. He was a gunner's mate. And the week before, they took us up on the deck for 45 training, and we didn't have the headgear that you've got now, and I proceeded to blow out my left ear.
Wow.
And to the point, as of today, all I hear is squealing in it, but it was bleeding at that time.
And this was right before you.
Yeah, and I was afraid they're going to keep me if they knew that was happening, so I didn't tell them. So I got on a plane and flew for 20 hours to Seattle, Washington. And at that height on an airplane, that ear it was the most miserable 20 hours of my life. It was terrible, terrible stuff. And we flew there, and then we flew on down to Travis Air Force Base. And then they flew us back to where we started up in Great Lakes
In Chicago.
to transition us out. I almost got caught in, tell you what, I almost got caught in Treasure Island. They were going to keep me there to do paperwork for a week for other people.
Where was Treasure Island?
Treasure Island's off the Bay Bridge in San Francisco Harbor.
Okay.
Alcatraz is just right over here, and Treasure Island's here. That's where they had the World's Fair back in 1890 or something. And I ran into a chief, Corena. He was a Filipino, and he was a chief on the ship, and it was one of those good guys. And I said, they're going to keep me here. And he said, let me see what I can do. Next morning, I was out of there. I'd have kissed him on the mouth if I could have found him. It was the best day of my life getting out of there. So we flew to Chicago, and then they discharged us from there.
Was that it? Were you released from the service?
Yeah, after that, I had to report to the Navy Reserve Center. The one in Covington was down. Do you know where it was?
No.
Do you know where the, what is it? Not the Toyota, the expensive Toyota. What's it called?
Lexus.
Lexus dealer is down there.
Sure.
Right across the street was the Navy Reserve Center. It was it was a beautiful building. It was white like a ship, and it had all the brass work and all that stuff. And they had torn that down in the period of time I was over there and built the Conservatory nightclub. And so I had to go over in Cincinnati on Torrance, I think it was, to the Navy Reserve Center there. And I go in, he goes, "Can we talk you into staying?" I said, "No." I said, "I don't like what happened the last time. They told me I'd get 2 years shore duty, and I ended up 2 years on a ship cruising off Vietnam. Next time they might send me someplace worse." And he said, "Well," he said, "normally you'd have to do 2 years of meetings, but since you did Vietnam duty, you don't have to do any." And that was the end of my Navy career.
And what was your rank at that point?
E4.
E4.
When I went on active, I was E3, and I was E4 when I got back.
And you had mentioned previously that how you were depressed when they sent you back for another tour. How'd you feel when they told you you were finished?
Great. I went back to work with my dad, and my brothers we were all in the same business together down in Ludlow.
Did you have any problems transitioning back to civilian life?
Probably the worst problem is I picked up the drinking habit most Navy guys do, and that was a big deal. For the next probably 10 years, I wasn't an alcoholic, but I would drink to excess sometimes, and it caused problems. So that was the only thing I really picked up.
Did you think about Vietnam at all after you served?
Used to have dreams about being stuck there,
Oh, really?
and I couldn't get out. Yeah,
On
nightmares.
the ship or on the shore?
Anywhere over there, it didn't matter. I was still in the Navy, and I couldn't get. That was one of my two nightmares I have in my life. That one, and still being in the mobile home business. That was the other nightmare. So I got two of them. Still have them occasionally.
You still have the
Yeah,
Vietnam gym after all these years?
yeah. Like I said, I didn't see. I had a lot of friends got killed, and it just. And I saw a lot of them die afterwards because of the Agent Orange.
Did you become active in the veterans groups when you got home?
No. Did a little bit later on. I started having some issues. I got first my ear. I have 80 or 85% hearing loss, and a year or two after I got out, they kept telling me you ought to go down to the VA and tell them what you've got because that's a service connected. So I went there, and it was like I might as well have gone in and pissed against the wall because they weren't interested. They just weren't interested. And I spent half a day there, and the last place they always sent you when you went to VA is into a little smelly room, and you had some doctor there that would tell you to drop your pants, and he'd grab a hold of your testicles and tell you to cough. And that was it. And I said, my ear was the problem, Can my ear cough? So I said, I'm done with this. I'm not going to deal with these people ever again. And I got away from it. And that went on until the early 2000s. And I was working for Cincinnati Bell, and one of the ladies I worked with there, her husband was with the DAV. And I told her the story. She said, they shouldn't have done that. And I said, that's what they did. And he got me another checkup, and I had 80 or 85% hearing loss, tinnitus out the yin yang, and I get my $118 a month for that.
And you mentioned Agent Orange. Was it the 70s or the 80s when you started hearing about Agent Orange? Was it even later?
No, actually, when I got back in the 70s, I had sold a mobile home to a kid over real nice kid. He was a little bit younger than me. And I sold him a mobile home over there, and he had 4 boys, something like that. And he had just gotten back a few years before. And all of a sudden, and he was in his 20s, and all of a sudden he's got 6 or 7 different kinds of cancer. And we knew what it was, but they were ignoring it. They were waiting for all the mistakes to die.
Yeah, I think it's just been the last 2 or 3 years where they've actually.
After they get all the negative press is when they do something, and then they'll go back doing the same stuff again. Yeah, that's just the way the veterans administration does stuff. There's so many guys that don't want to deal. Look at all those guys with PTSD from World War II. I mean, those guys went through hell. I had relatives, two of them ended up killing themselves down the line. I know it was from that. One of them was in the Battle of the Bulge. You know, he was telling me once, he said, I walked through a field and he said there was nothing but bodies, including his friends laying there. He said and he was always real quiet about it. He wouldn't talk about it. But that's what you ran into. And those guys were kicked out the door, not given anything, unless they were total whack jobs and then they put them in a home someplace. But that was about it. But I saw a lot of that. Now I become more active. I started going to ships reunions with my wife, and we started getting more involved with people with the Agent Orange exposure, because most everybody on our ship has it. And we became friends with a lot of them, and that's the way it is.
So do you have reunions every year then?
They have them every year. I have not been since my wife and I were going. We went every year for 4 or 5 years. My wife died in 3 years ago, and she was my second wife. She wasn't married to me when I was in the Navy, and when we got married in '95, I think. She was diagnosed with medullary carcinoma, which is a thyroid cancer, and that was in 1982 or '83. And she was terminal when we got married. It was incurable, and hers was worse than most of them are. And so her and I started going, and then she died, and then I just plus the guys that I had gone there with that I knew are all dead now too.
That's really
Yeah.
You mentioned that you still see Mike Taylor.
I still see Mike. Mike came up for a wedding. Mike still lives down in Louisville. He's been married 3 times. 3 times, yeah. Carl, the guy that worked in the office with me, he's been married 3 times. And he lives in Texas. Now I was talking about going to the reunion this year in Texas, but I don't know if I'm going to. Yeah, I just don't know.
How did the military service affect your life?
When it was over, I'm glad I went. Agent Orange has changed my life. I had to have a triple bypass because of it. That was 2008. So that's affected me. So,
Yeah. Are you fully recovered now?
yeah, as well as you can be, yeah.
And how did your military service affect your feelings about war and life in the military?
And I felt this way when I went there. I could never see any rhyme or reason for going into war without going in to win. They had done that in Korea. They did it in Vietnam. They keep doing this crap. If you're going to fight, go in, win, and get it over with. But I don't know.
And before we conclude, is there anything you'd like to add about your life, military service, or anything you think we missed today?
Yeah, the video and stuff I gave you there. That was about my youngest son, and he was 8 or 9, and he was diagnosed with acute lymphoblastic leukemia, and he ended up spending the next 10 years going to Children's over in Cincinnati, and he died in '99.
I'm sorry to hear that.
And I've had a lot of things that have shaped what I've been in my life. My parents, my service, what little bit I had made a difference in what I did. My kids, my grandkids, and it's getting older, getting to this point, it's tough starting to lose them, and I'm losing them, so that's the bad part.